know what makes a video game great? Being so innovative that you single-handedly create a genre, solidifying your place as a trailblazer in the gaming landscape. For example, Doom and Wolfenstein paving the way for first-person shooters. You know what makes a video game iconic? Seamlessly combining different gameplay mechanics in order to build a structure which becomes so recognizable that it spawns a genre named after its own likeness. I'm obviously talking about roguelikes, souls-likes, metroidvanias. The original titles that define their respective genre have unintentionally put a curse on every game that follows them to be forever compared to what came before them. But you know what makes a video game special? When they have to deal with this adversity, yet they create such a distinctive atmosphere to then combine it with a breathtaking level of world building and an intricate gameplay loop, resulting in masterpieces that can stand on their own 2 feet and become the new sources of inspirations for future titles in the genre. Games like Hollow Knight and Lies of P not only took what was great about their predecessors and learned from their mistakes, but they also brought their own stuff to the table, innovating their respective genre further and increasing the bar to such high standards when it comes to creating polished products and groundbreaking experiences that they have now become the new mascots of the medium they were trying to fit in. We can see the astonishing influence of these titles by looking at how many games have come out or plan to release that are clearly inspired by their aesthetic or even their gameplay mechanics. There are tasteful examples of games wearing their inspirations on their sleeve, whilst pushing the envelope further, but there are also evident cases of straight up plagiarism, as some developers don't realize that the appeal of the games they are trying to mimic is their originality, as uniqueness has become the differentiating factor that separates the bloat from the goats in this oversaturated medium. And you know what makes a game unique? Coming into a genre that already has gigantic support beams that define it, or should I say pillars, wink wink. The ceiling is so high it feels like it reaches divinity, wink wink. The space is so crowded there is no room to fit through the gate, you get the idea. And despite all of this, it effortlessly squeezes through and soars above all the rest because it experimented so much and took so many risks and daring creative decisions that it created its own bubble, impossible to penetrate or replicate. I'm obviously talking about Disco Elysium here. How can you define this game? At its core, yeah, it's basically a CRPG, but if you dare to compare it to any other game in the genre, you will actually find a very tiny amount of similarities. You can draw pretty striking parallels between Ori and Hollow Knight, or between Bloodborne and Lies of P, but this type of comparison gets muddier when you put most CRPGs next to Disco Elysium, which would basically make Disco Elysium a genre-defining game. That being said, as of November 2025, I have yet to hear the term of Disco Elysium-like to be used, and yet we are now entering a new era where endless titles seem to chase and replicate that Disco Elysium feeling, as the similarities are uncanny, but this is still not considered a specific genre. And I think that's because of how unique Disco Elysium actually is, and it's practically impossible to reproduce its authenticity. You can make an RPG with an emphasis on the art style that is also dialogue focused, which presents existential themes through a suspenseful narrative, but I think that's still half of what makes Disco Elysium special. You can add the political commentary, the crude humor, and the profound character development, and you would still miss a couple of important elements. That's why I believe Disco Elysium lives in its own isolated echo chamber. Can't compare it with anything that came before it nor after it. The definition of lightning in a bottle. And since the IP is being held hostage by the game's publisher and the original team responsible for developing the game has dissolved, we will never see anything like it ever again. For real, fuck these guys. If you haven't played Disco Elysium yet and you wanna try it, please pirate the game. This is the ethical thing to do. With the original developers being spread across multiple spiritual successors, it seems that anyone can pick up the mantle and follow in the footsteps of this giant, and if someone is daring enough to do that, they better have the same confidence, creative vision, and will to break any boundaries in order to have the chance of recreating the same magic. And would you look at that? Someone appears to have just done it, or should I say they came close to it. When I'm telling you that despite looking forward to 2 Obsidian releases, a Life is Strange spiritual successor and a multiplayer Elden Ring, Rue Valley was my most anticipated game this year, you would probably not be surprised at all, considering how much time I spent glazing Disco Elysium during this video. I also need to mention that I put Silksong in the same conversation with Bloodborne 2, and I never expected it to ever come out, so I cannot say I was anticipating that release. But Rue Valley, oh boy, I looked at one trailer back when the game was first announced and I instantly had my hopes up that this game was going to be something special, because it seemed that the developers were going to do the same thing that made Disco Elysium feel special. They were going to do something different, and I'm here to report that they indeed managed to create something notable that doesn't fall in the shadow of Disco Elysium. So this is the part of the video where I will stop mentioning Disco Elysium in order to do Rue Valley proper justice, because I don't want it to be reduced to only being a spiritual successor to Disco Elysium. Okay, stop the count. The only thing that Rue Valley takes from its biggest inspiration is the roadmap. We want to make a visually striking, dialogue-focused RPG, said the developers, whilst proceeding to add their own signature touches to the structure that came before. Wow, I've never seen such a gorgeous art style be used in a top-down CRPG before, and now I want every game to look like this, said KIPH, proceeding to praise the game's visual aesthetic. I think that Spider-Verse success had one of the best ripple effects in culture, as we've seen more and more visual media adopt this art style, because it adds the sauce that the audience has been craving for a long time. And I'm happy that other video game companies besides Telltale Games and Gearbox have decided to also go in this direction. Everything about Rue Valley's visual presentation screams sauce, because the cel-shaded graphics makes every location and character model pop. The smooth animations give the entire experience an extra level of polish, and the comic book feeling truly comes to life in the dialogue, as it is structured as a literal comic book, with speech bubbles and hand-drawn images. The thing is, the developers had to put a lot of attention when it comes to making the environments look pretty, considering that you will see the same locations over and over again during the entire runtime of the game, as the narrative is structured around the time loop. This is how Rue Valley completely differentiates itself from its biggest influence, as the time loop mechanic not only is the main selling point of the game, but also what will eventually make Rue Valley feel special when looking back at it in a couple of years. Mark my words. Rue Valley puts you in control of Eugene Harrow, troubled man that has been sent to the titular town to undergo psychotherapeutic treatment after a difficult incident that remains unknown for the entire duration of the game. After spacing out during your first therapy session, you wake up at 8 PM to find yourself staying at a desolated motel in a small town forgotten by time, Rue Valley. You take in your surroundings, accept the sad reality of being stuck in the middle of nowhere, check into your room, unpack, fail to fall asleep, witness a car crash, almost get struck by lightning, go for a drink, and that's when the sky turns red as if a nuke has just landed near you. You close your eyes, embracing the darkness, ready for your problems to be swept away, and that's when the clock hits 8:47. You hear the voice of your therapist, and as if it was just a dream, you wake up in the motel room at the end of your first session. The following 47 minutes almost play out the same way, and as soon as that clock hits 8:47, the skies get set ablaze once again. You already know what's going to happen. You wake up at 8:00 as if nothing happened, and the cycle repeats itself. That's the premise of Rue Valley, without getting into spoilers. And I won't do that because the entire driving force of the narrative is the mystery surrounding the time loop and Eugene's inner turmoil. If Disco Elysium focused on existentialism when addressing the complicated affections of a troubled human mind, Rue Valley puts the lens closer to the ailment itself, that is, mental illness, whilst focusing on the healing process and its many hurdles. I'm already saying too much, but the narrative and the psychological motifs are closely tied together, and the time loop itself is an allegory for... Anyway, besides enriching the story with a unique depth of flavor, the repeating cycle of 47 minutes actually structures the gameplay loop in such a memorable and distinctive way that it perfectly maximizes the limited resources and budget the developers developers had to deal with. Usually, if a piece of media deals with a time loop as its main focus, it would most likely center the story around a wider time frame in order to not constrain itself. Rue Valley bravely opts out of using this safety net and limits each loop to only 47 minutes, narrowing the player's ability to do stuff by quite a large margin. There's so much stuff you can do in only 47 minutes, so you'll end up doing the same things over and over again. On one hand, time stays still whilst exploring, so you don't feel the pressure of having to rush through the game, but every other action chips away at your precious minutes, so you have to take into account how you're going to approach each cycle in order to complete different objectives. As you progress further into the story, you do discover more areas, but Rue Valley maximizes each location perfectly, as you are constantly jumping between the same 3 to 4 spots, unlocking more dialogue with each cycle. Therefore, the gameplay loop doesn't get repetitive despite seeing the same walking and driving animations over and over again, because the story is never put on hold. The game's narrative is constantly flowing and expanding. Besides in one part of the story, where the pacing crawls to a halt as you are forced to visit the same area for like an hour and a half in order to advance, you always feel like there is something to do, as you are constantly unlocking missions which you can approach in any order you see fit, making the world feel more extensive and player choice more important, because some objectives will completely cancel each other out. The game literally tells you that you cannot do everything, so you must plan accordingly. But speaking of the world, Rue Valley as an entity, it's a comprehensive portrayal throughout the entire game as you interact with its few yet captivating inhabitants. Every NPC fills in the gaps when it comes to the history and the current state of their small town, which coincidentally happens to attract anything but regular situations. Every character has its believable place in this detailed world, but the full painting never gets finished because the game leaves plenty of room for questions that might not even have an answer. That being said, despite being filled with multiple characters whose unique personalities shine through in the dialogue, the game is unapologetic when it comes to making Eugene the highlight of the entire experience. The convoluted journey of this mentally ill fella is not only captivating, but it is also hilarious and inspiring at the same time. Callback to Disco, at its core, Rue Valley is still an RPG, so you get to pick how messed up your Eugene actually is going to be. And that is most definitely a unique and interesting way to approach character creation, because in most games you get to pick your protagonist's traits and sometimes their flaws too, helping out the immersion. But in Rue Valley, you only get to pick Eugene's flaws, as the point of the game is to see how you can navigate stressful situations whilst also being over encumbered by your mental instability. You have to embrace being awkward or impatient, as these imperfections will actively get in your way, making you fail various speech checks, but there's no way to get rid of them, so you have to work around them. Like I told you, the mental health theme gets perfectly integrated into the main gameplay loop as you navigate Eugene through his temporal and psychological journeys. And by the end of these journeys, not only will you get emotional after connecting to Eugene's struggle, but you might actually extract powerful life lessons which you can apply in your personal life. And that's when a video game transcends being a game and it becomes art. When it comes to Rue Valley, wherever you look, there's always a deeper meaning or a hidden detail, and I'm not only talking about the fictional place of Rue Valley, but the game itself. It breathes nothing but creativeness and passion to deliver a unique product. One instance I've encountered during my playthrough that perfectly summarizes what type of game Rue Valley is, very mild spoilers, is when I was trying to get into a particular motel room and I had to get my hands on a master keycard. The only way I could do that is by faking that I lost my personal keycard and requesting the master one in order to get into my room. The thing is, after checking in and receiving my keycard, I immediately informed the receptionist that I lost it without actually leaving the room, and she instantly called me out on my bullshit and didn't fall for my puny deception. Like, excuse me, I thought I was playing a regular video game, not a highly detailed work of art that constantly highlights the passion that went into making it. If I want to be critical about the game, I would mention pacing issues, especially the one that I've previously referenced. Like I said, the game is very limited when it comes to locations, and it is also quite short. It took me like 9 hours to beat. Therefore, spending almost 2 hours on a singular area of the game nearly took me out of the story. Moreover, the ending also feels a bit rushed and abrupt, considering how gradually the game builds towards it. Despite these issues, I have nothing bad to say about Rue Valley. Despite its striking similarities, it is not a spiritual successor to the other game. It is its own thing. It is splendid at creating a unique experience that combines a comprehensive time loop mechanic with a profound narrative centered around mental illness. And on top of all of that, it is one of the most visually striking games that have ever come out in recent years. It won't make you feel like Disco Elysium made you feel, and that's okay. That game changed our lives and moved on to inspire future developers to create their own masterpieces. And we're now just starting to see that snowball effect. I'm content. I don't need another Disco Elysium, but I do need another Rue Valley, or at least another game from this talented team, because I think they know what they're doing. If you want to play a good ass game that's unlike anything on the market, please consider buying Rue Valley and supporting these passionate developers. If you want to support a passion content creator, I'm literally standing right here, so please consider supporting the channel by liking and subscribing. If you've played Disco Elysium or Rue Valley, also feel free to comment detailing your experience. Until Zero Parades comes out next year, I will try to stop mentioning Disco Elysium. Until I make that video, I will hopefully see you in the next one. Thank you for giving me your time of day. Your presence has been priceless. Take care.